Hey folks, thanks for joining me as we continue our journey in building this Sherman by RFM with full interior. If you're just joining me for the first time, we've so far done the interior hull and the turret, and today we're going to be working on the exterior to turn this into the Easy 8 Sherman from the movie Fury. Alrighty folks, we're going to start first by working on this running gear. So we have some road wheels here. We're going to weather them up. And a real easy way to weather up road wheels, especially rubber road wheels at that, is to actually just cut out a few small chunks. If you look at any kind of reference photos from tanks, they would get chewed up and stuff like that, especially on concrete or asphalt or even just dirt roads. The rubber would kind of dry rot out or wear out and chip off. So you can do that really easy with a blade. The suspension is workable on this kit, and you can see here how it still goes back and forth. Now I will note I had the volute springs backwards here, so don't worry, I caught that and I fixed it on a live stream with the Hobby Time Modelers group. So I did fix the volute suspension. The springs are all facing in the right direction now. So alongside that, I also clipped off the top of that antenna to make room for a metal antenna that I will add after we paint it. Okay, so just a side note on that. So once we got that done, I also wanted to fit on the gun mantlet, and you can see I actually got that aftermarket barrel, and it actually fit perfectly in. It wasn't designed for RFM, it was just designed, it was like a generic one, but it actually worked perfectly. That's why I just wanted to test versus the stock barrel. So this is the upgrade kit that I got with the RFM kit, so they actually offer an upgrade kit, and I love the instructions. It actually tells you exactly what angles to bend at and stuff like that. Much better and easier to work with than some other aftermarket photo etch kits. Works really well. You can see here that it even has all the little handles for up inside. A lot of times kit makers don't really care about the underside of the upper hull, which is kind of nice to see that they really paid attention to that. So even these periscope color covers and whatnot, it looks really good when it's put on there. I use VMS CA glue for all that, so you can see that's why it's black CA glue. Using my nippers here, I cut off those springs because this upgrade kit actually includes metal springs as well. And this is actually pretty neat. This is a really intricate part just because there's all these tiny parts where you can see how I'm putting in the sections of this spring that's going to go on here. So first we had like the mount basically for this keyhole, which really, alright, this is like a threaded bolt that's going in here. So you have a threaded bolt, and then you have a spring that attaches to it. So you can see it's actually still workable with the photo etch that they give you there. So the springs attach pretty easily, at least on one side, because it is just like a little tiny spring. So what I did was I actually had to come back and open up the one side a little bit and nip a little bit off because it kind of curled around and it was really hard to get an angle on it. So I just nipped it, and here you can see I nipped them and stretched them out a little bit just so they would fit inside those bolt holes, inside the eyes. So next, I just wanted to show you guys how I do my photo etch. In case you are new to this channel and haven't seen how I do photo etch, I have a little pair of Tamiya bending pliers that I use for doing all these little photo etch parts. Like here for this part of the commander's hatch, commander's cupola. This is his little his hatch cover, part of it anyway. So you can see the latching mechanism there, had the housing for that. This is VMS's Transpafix, so this is glue for transparent parts. And this is really good for like doing these cupola windows, ports, viewports, I think we want to call them, right? So works really well for that. This is included in the upgrade kit as well, and this is two 50 cal ammo boxes, one of them specifically for the mounted 50 cal on top of the turret. So you can see how easy this is to bend. Now I am using another set of Tamiya bending pliers. These are the much bigger ones, so I actually have two sets of Tamiya bending pliers, and they're well worth it if you have a lot of photo etch to bend. You can see how easily things are just bending into place. I actually prefer that over the like the plates, the bending plates. But anyway, here I just wanted to show you guys, I have these knife sharpeners I got on Amazon that work really well for cleaning up brass photo etch. it's really nice. I mean, you can sharpen your blades too if you wanted to with it, but I like it just for getting those nubs off, and especially with little intricate things like this, you want all them nubs gone. But you can see how it builds up so nicely into that 50 cal ammo box, feeding into the 50 cal machine gun on top of the turret. It just looks so nice. And there is one little piece here, like that latch left yet. It just, I love the details. The upgrade kit's only a little bit more, you know, cost-wise to add to the kit, and it really adds a lot, in my opinion, for details like that on top of that 50 cal machine gun, which even that 50 cal is really well done in molding. I mean, it just looks really good. Again, I keep saying that about RFM. I'm just, you know, I'm really learning to love RFM's kits because I don't have to do a lot to add a lot, if that makes sense. Like I'm adding these grab handles and I'm adding on the photo etch that they're offering, but like the texturing is there, the molding is there. There's just not a lot of cleanup on these newer RFM kits. So one little thing here is I did have to nip off this handle, and I glued it where it would go so it looks right when the turret is put together, and it's in the correct position when the turret top is removed. But I did need to nip that part off and glue it in place separately from the actual hatch there on the side of the turret. And then also I want to point out the seam line there that we have to deal with, which we'll deal with that later. Now with these photo etch fenders, one thing that's really odd is that instead of actually molding on like any kind of a lump, which they wouldn't be able to because it's not molded, it's a piece of brass, you actually have to bend that piece out. I thought that was a little odd, but at the same time, it looks okay. So I used the back end of the pliers there, as you saw, or tweezers I should say, not pliers, to make that lump stand out. So I also just used super glue on the inside. I'm still not very good at soldering, and this thick CA just works so well with some kicker on the inside, which you saw me apply with a blunt needle. It just works so well, and you get a very strong joint. Not as strong as solder, albeit, but it's very strong for what I'm going to be handling this model, which is not very often. So you can see what it looks like when it's attached. Now you will notice that I attached the fenders to the bottom part of the hull, not to the upper hull, and there's a very good reason for that. We'll show that later, but moving on to using this bending tool that I have to bend the light guards, the light covers, and this one here is specifically the siren cover. But yeah, going back to the reason I glued on the fenders to the bottom is so I can pull the top part of the hull off and show off the interior. So I don't want to say redesign, but I put this together in a way that's slightly different from the instructions. So I did it so I could actually pull everything apart later. At least I plan to do that anyway, so we'll see. But again, after we got these brass parts on, I think this looks really, really good. We're going to move on to the rear. Same exact thing. I use the same tool to bend all the rear light guards and just put those in place. And I just think this turned out really, really well. I love the brass parts. I have seen some kits now actually offer 3D printed parts for the light guards, and it looks really nice, but brass is really nice. It's still better than the kit parts. This next piece is the stowage rack on the back, and I just wanted to show you guys how I actually do the hinges. So I actually use whatever metal I'm putting through as the pin in the hinge, if you will, and I use that then to bend the hinge around, so that way I make sure I have the clearance to put the metal through. So then you can see I did the one half on the stowage rack piece and then the other half on the hull plate, and you can see I'm just putting that same wire. I cut it down to size obviously then, and then I just push it through, and because I use this same wire to create that opening, that hole, it lines up. You still have to wiggle it a little bit, but you know you have the right amount of clearance. You don't have to kind of guess or make it so big. Like if you go too big a wire, like use a bigger gauge wire, then the wire just falls out when you put in the correct gauge wire, and then you don't have a nice hinge. So here there's no glue in there, it's a workable hinge. Now I'm going to glue it later, but just to show you the point that those hinges are in there, the pins I should say. So there's a couple extra small parts like these wing nuts and other brackets, and I did use the kit part for the gun cleaning rods on the bottom there rather than the upgrade parts, only because the upgrade parts actually looked less accurate because it was just styrene tube. There was no little notches on the end where the cleaning rod actually twists together, where it's threaded and goes together. That wasn't in the upgrade kit, so I actually felt like the upgrade kit wasn't an upgrade. just on that part specifically. So don't mind my hair here. It was a little wild that morning and it was wanting to get in the shot. So just ignore my hair for a moment. What I'm doing is I'm putting on a thin strip of brass that is actually part of the fender assembly. It actually comes in two pieces there. So you actually have a piece that goes against the hull there all the way across, and then you have the actual fender that we see. There's actually a third piece then that goes over top of those two gaps that we have. It's just like a support bracket or piece of plate that you would call it. So that's why I wanted to separate again the fenders, so you can see how you can easily pull the upper hull off of the lower. So these holes were missing on this kit. This is one of the few things that I noticed that RFM was missing. The weep holes or drain holes were missing here on these two parts, on both sides as well. Interestingly enough, they had a gap in the weld seam detail, but they didn't include the hole, so I had to drill those out. Now the other pieces to the side fenders, I can work on them now that I have that drilling out of the way, and because I realized that as I was looking at it, I'm like, wait a sec, there's supposed to be holes there. So stop to do that, then move on to finishing up the fenders. And you can see I just bend those parts into their shape, and then just glue them on with some of that black CA. And I think this turned out really nice. And again, it's definitely an improvement over the plastic parts that were in the kit. I just think it looks really, really nice. And then you can just see down both sides. It's actually kind of cool because sometimes when you put photo etch fenders on, they can become like a weak point. Like I know with the Panther, I dealt with that. Same thing with the Tiger. Like I knocked off the Tiger fender so much in that video. I mean, obviously you guys didn't see that, but I put those fenders back on multiple times throughout that entire build series. I didn't have to do that at all with the Sherman because of the supports on the side. So moving on to the tracks, I will say that these tracks may look extremely daunting at first because there's so many pieces. You can see here we got to put the bottom track cleats on, then we're going to put the track pins in place, and then we're going to put the pad on the top, or the inside, I would say, the inside of the track pad. And you have to put just a small amount of glue, and they put a little hole there for you, which is very well designed. And so long as you only put glue in that hole, it'll hold. I did have a few where I put too much glue down and it actually glued to the jig. I had a few where I didn't put enough glue down and it did not stick. So these were, I would say, like 80% of my track pieces. My segments went together really well, but there were a few that I struggled, and it wasn't that the kit did anything wrong, it was me. And you can see after you put that all together, you cut those track pin nubs off. Really nice. The design of this is really nice. It is time consuming. It probably took me about 5 hours to just do the tracks alone. And again, I know that sounds daunting, but this is like, I didn't do it just at my workbench. I was sitting watching TV most of the time. This was actually from the live stream at Hobby Time Modelers group that I did, showing everyone that it's actually not that bad. But I want to show you guys, as we finish these track links up, just how beautiful they turned out. Some plastic workable tracks, quote unquote, unworkable, like they don't actually work. They either like get stuck, they don't work, or they just fall apart. Typically it's that they just fall apart because they're like snap fits. These here, because of the way that track pin is placed in the middle, and then you glue the front and the back of the track over the pin, you actually get a secure, workable track. And this is actually how, like, the 1/16 scale Sherman that I built, this is exactly how they were built, made at 1/16 scale. And it's just so beautiful. They work so well. You can see here when I pop them out, this was one of the very good ones. Pops right out. The guide horns are even in place, and the jig even lines up the guide horns, and you can see it's fully workable. And when we have to put the links together, then, or the segments together, we can still use the same jig in the same process. It's just that we put the segments together. And each side takes 76 links, or tracks, I should say. So you need to do the math to figure that out. I think it worked out that I did a couple of the segments with 6 tracks, and then there was one with 5 at the end. That way I could bring it all together, and you can see here how workable they are. I mean, they literally flop around in your hand, which is how workable tracks should be. Workable. I mean, between these or like metal tracks, these work just fine. I'm not saying metal tracks are bad. They definitely go together faster than these, but for something that comes in the kit, it's beautiful. Now, I wanted to recreate a lot of the scratches and stuff that you see. This is one of the few things I didn't notice on the turret in this kit. It has a beautiful cast texture, but no scratches. And unfortunately, we're going to cover a lot of these up. But I just used a Tamiya scriber tool to put those in place. So at this point, I have most of the photo etched down, and the plastic parts are on the tank. What I want to do now is add the resin parts that make it look like Fury. So after I removed all the resin parts from the resin molding that they come in, right? These aren't 3D printed, they're actually molded resin. It can be a little dangerous to remove the parts because they'll stick to the mold, like the bottom of the mold, and you have to cut them out, and they can become very brittle and you can break stuff, which I did. But look at those results. That gas mask on the front looks so good. You can see I broke this board that goes in the front, but interestingly enough, it does not fit this tank. I'm thinking maybe it's supposed to be for another model, but there's a little bit of a gap there. So no big deal. I cut that bag off the top. I took some balsa wood I had laying around, which is actually the size of a 2x4 at 1/35 scale. And you see I cut that bag off, and then I set it down in place, and voila, we have the same thing. And there is that spare set of tracks that they used in the movie that doesn't even fit this tank. It's funny, but it's iconic. And also the spare road wheel, which also probably doesn't fit this tank at all. So anyway, moving on to the back, we have some ammunition crates. So those are ammunition boxes, some small ammunition, other smaller boxes, and then we have like fuel canisters here. Again, this is actually, this kit is designed to match Fury from the movie. So they have all the reference photos there to show you exactly where all this stuff goes, so you can match that tank, including that water can that's on the left side there that you see. And then there's like a spool of wire there and duffel bags. And then in this middle part, it's not super clear from the pictures what all goes here, except for that toolbox definitely goes there. But there's basically a bunch of little like crates and boxes that go in the middle. These bags, however, they give you like where the straps go on the sides, you can see there, but obviously with them they're not 3D printed, right? They're molded, so if they're molded, they can't really have like straps on them. So I had to add my own straps. And what I did was I took some really thin masking tape and I just cut it to width to get it pretty close, and then I super glued it in place. So I used one side had CA glue on it, and then the other side, like say the tape, had some kicker on it. So that way when I finally got them to connect, it would instantly harden. Right, so that's a nice little trick. Put CA on one part, put the kicker on the other part, and when the two parts come together, they instantly set. And that's what I did here with this bag, how I was able to get that to go through that light guard loop and then reattach without having to like apply anything else. So I did the same thing here. There's actually kicker on the bucket, glue on the handle of the bucket, which I bent out of wire, and I just hung it over that stowage rack bit there, and then you can see it's just hardening into place. So if you take notice here, RFM tried to include some grab handles that are near the engineering tools, but when they try to mold on grab handles, they always just come out as flat bars. So what I did was I just nipped them off, and I actually attached my own little grab handles there. Gives it a really nice look, very realistic. Now, the next step is we have to attach the logs to the side here, and in order to do that, I wanted to use the rope, quote unquote, that was included. So they included a really nice set of string in this RFM upgrade kit. Or not RFM upgrade kit, this is actually the Legend upgrade kit, I'm sorry. In the Legend kit, they gave you this piece of string, and it's a really nice piece of string that looks like wound rope at 1/35 scale, and it's not like frizzy and fuzzy. Like a lot of times if you try to use thread or something, it can get really, really frizzy and fuzzy, and then when you go to paint it, it's almost impossible to paint because it's so fuzzy. This wasn't like that at all. This rope was really nice to work with, very easy to work with, and basically what I did was I lined up the first log. I actually put two grab handles down first. You can see I drilled out spots for grab handles to actually tie them to. And then I lined up the first log with those grab handles and made a mark on them. And then I glued each piece, each log to the rope as I tied the rope around it. That way, as I tied the rope around the log, it would stick to the log. So I glued each one in place. But I left a little bit of slack there, so it gave it some weight look, and then that's when I just wrapped it around and brought it back up to the tie down grab handle, if you will, that I attached there, that you see me holding everything fast to. And then I tied a little knot and then C8'd it in place, hit it with some kickers so it cured, and then just nipped off the extra rope to make it look like it was a tied knot and set there. And it looks really good. I mean, I was really happy with those results. So I repeated the same thing on the opposite side, and then I actually came back to tie down the rear stowage. So I thought I was filming when I did the rest of the tie down stowage. So I apologize. I only captured this piece of going over the top, but you'll see there's actually another piece of rope going around the front of the stowage and another piece going around the back. And you'll see that here in a moment, but I thought I hit record, and apparently I hit not record. I don't know. Things happen when you're at the workbench trying to record. So anyway, you can see I'm just fishing this rope through to make it look like everything is tied down. You know, nothing is just free floating because, as one commenter put it, the Sherman Fury is just a few boxes short of a traveling gypsy van, which I thought was the funniest thing I heard in a long time. So kudos to you, Mark, for that comment. That was beautiful. So anyway, I just used CA to again make it look like it was tied down to these struts for the side skirts, and then I moved on to, well, of course, nipping it, and then I actually did the other ropes too while I was at it. Like I said, one around the front, one around the back. Now, I needed that actually to attach this part on the right that we're about to see, because I actually noticed there were a few bags that were like hanging off the rope. So here you can see I have those ropes tied in place. They're all tied down to the grab handle, or actually I think it's a lifting hook on the back, or a lifting eye on the back. You can see there I just tied everything down to the ropes, put that in place there, and I was really happy with how that all turned out. I mean, there's a lot of stuff on the back of that tank, but it looks great. So now moving on to that seam I mentioned earlier. So I did this on my 1/16 scale Sherman, and it turned out wonderfully, and I want to do the same here. So RFM gave us a nice casting, and you can see by this reference photo, compare and contrast, right? You can see that underneath the seam, it's very textured, and on some turrets I've seen this clear grinding that they've done around that seam. So what I wanted to do is just recreate that texture of the grinding with this ball burr. And the other thing it allowed me to do was kind of hide that seam a little bit, because I thought about using epoxy putty, but anything I would put in that seam is going to make it so that I can't take that turret top off. And I want to be able to open that up to show off that interior, because elsewise those details would just be lost. So here you can see, after I got that grinding done, I started attaching the bags to the side, and again I'm using that same tape from earlier, that masking tape. I did use a piece of wire for that one bag because it actually looked like it was wired on from the reference photos. But anyway, same thing with this bag. I added 2 shoulder straps to it just to hang it over top of that 50 cal stowage rack there. And now this might not be 100% accurate to the movie where all these placements are, but I think it's accurate to the spirit of the movie. So anyway, the next thing, and I should say the last thing, was I added our little commander figure here in the same pose that our commander was at in the movie, hanging out the turret to look at all this. So that's it. That's the assembly of the Fury Sherman, guys. I hope you appreciate all this. All right, folks, I hope you all enjoyed that. Please, if you did like what you saw today, please leave a like, leave a comment, and tell me what you thought. And don't forget to subscribe so you can continue on this journey with me as we start to paint this model. But before you go, I have plenty of more stuff to talk about. So up next here in just a second is going to be the diorama we're going to be building after this tank is done. Yes, I've told you guys about this. This shouldn't be a shock. I've told you guys so many times when we were doing the Tiger in the last series that this was going to be part of a diorama. So behold, I have two freshly printed 3D bases that we're going to be putting together. After the Sherman is painted, we will do these two dioramas together, and this will actually make our scene showing Fury fighting the Tiger. Now, you'll notice this isn't Tiger 131 that it's going to be fighting, because I tried to make it a little bit more historically accurate, more so than movie accurate in certain regards. So we do have this diorama coming up for you guys, and I hope that you'll all subscribe so you don't miss out on that, because I'm super excited. This was my vision when I went into getting these kits, and I'm super excited to get to that part and be able to share that with you guys. So next up, I wanted to say a special thanks to all of my patrons that have been supporting me over the last couple weeks as I'm building this tank up, and I'm just doing so much. I appreciate so much all of their support and words of encouragement. Thank you guys all so much, and also thank you to those who have been commenting. I wanted to just note here for you guys that I've had a poll up for the last couple days, both on my Patreon and on YouTube, and interestingly enough, it's almost the polar opposite. So I've only had a few patrons that have voted, so guys, if you haven't voted, please do so already. I'll put links in the description for both of those. But here is the model that the YouTubers have voted for, it seems like anyway, so far, is the M10 tank destroyer from TACOM, which this will be the project after the Sherman, after the diorama. And the patrons have chosen this Bradley from Magic Factory, which is a brand new kit, so that's really exciting. But again, guys, I'll put links in the description, but I want you guys to go vote. Now, another thing for my patrons and for those who may be interested is I am going to start doing some sneak peek video reveals as I go along as part of my patron package. So thank you guys. I appreciate you. I also wanted to note that I do have a special limited founders tier on my Patreon. If any of you guys are interested, it's a limited pricing tier starting at $1. If you would like to support my work, please feel free to check out my Patreon. I have regular updates. You can get a hold of me with direct messages or in group chat, and we can talk about modeling. We can answer any questions that you might have, so please definitely go check that out.